All right. Hello, everybody. While we're waiting to get started, I think we still have about 20 minutes to go. I'm going to give you some recordings that I did in time past. So my bio will be there. And just one thing I did on looting versus protest. So hopefully that will keep you engaged while we're waiting to get started. Okay. Enjoy. Hello, please pardon me as I'm working from home. You may hear my dogs in the background. I have four of them, and I need to apologize because it's hard to predict whether they'll cooperate or not. If you hear any barking, especially a deep, heavy barking, that would be Simba. He's male, German Shepherd, huge. Crystal barks, but not as often, and Alexa is kind of in between, while Moni is totally low key. So let's hope they'll all cooperate today. Just about my background, I'm a Black female finance executive with 3 decades of work experience in corporate America. I was challenged to create a podcast platform on reimagining Black relations, where all people will have the opportunity to understand, influence, and advance the next phase of Black relations. The death of George Floyd was the motivating factor. I was initially fearful about the proposition because of the probability of a backlash in corporate if I speak up. But my son reminded me that it would be a very small price to pay for the cause. So here we are today. Why your Black matters? You will be shocked to realize that every individual, all people of all race and creed, all over the world, has a Black matter. My goal is to use this podcast to take you through this journey so you can understand the depth of this phenomenon and how you can be an informed and an active participant and a contributor for that matter. The bottom line is that every individual can contribute to the history we are about to write. I was born in England to Nigerian parents. My forming years from age 5 through 18 were spent in Nigeria, where I completed my high school and the post high school classes referred to as advanced level courses or A levels. I wanted to study medicine, but was admitted for vet medicine at the University of Ibadan in Nigeria. So I decided to pursue my undergrad in London. I was admitted for chemical engineering, but midway through the program, my interest waned. I realized I had a passion for something else. It was business, so I changed path. I obtained my bachelor's in accountancy, master's in business administration, followed by doctoral in business with a specialization in international business. I have visited about 60 countries for work and pleasure. More importantly, I've led and participated in mission trips to quite a few countries as well, including Belize, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, Uganda, Guatemala, Central African Republic, Mexico, the Philippines, and many others. I founded and host in Los Angeles the Academic Excellence Program, where C-level executives and above congregate to motivate the future experts that are currently in high school. I mentor aspiring entrepreneurs through various foundations worldwide and founded SME Connect. This is an organization facilitating youth entrepreneurship and economic growth in the continent of Africa. I'm a founding member of the Fujimi Foundation, where underprivileged youths are sponsored to attend colleges and universities in Africa. Using my experience and global exposure, I want to use this podcast platform to share invaluable insights as a Black female executive, British, a Nigerian, an American, a wife, a mother, and a grandmother to a lovely 3-year-old I call my love. My goal is to provide unique perspectives that will advance the significance of global Black relations. As a researcher, I will use a combination of expert assessments, trends, and projections to advance the positive social change. This will include interviews with global experts, leaders, and influencers in the business environment, as well as spiritual and social context. The launch date of August 1st, 2020 is a defining moment for humanity, I can just guarantee you. And I look forward to this partnership. As a visitor here, you are part of a fantastic community. Your comments and feedback motivate me to continue. I will also use your responses to provide answers or generate more discussions. Thank you so much for being part of this community. There are plenty of ways that you can become more involved. The easiest way is to subscribe. Just scroll up and hit the subscribe button. I would also love to connect with you through my newly created social media, Facebook, LinkedIn. Those are my favorites. The weekly podcast is also another way to be involved. So please listen and forward it to your contacts. As you know, everyone has a Black matter. So let's explore and continue this journey together. Thank you. Hello again. Thank you for your feedback from my original post on the subject of systemic racism. Some of the options I offer for resolution, I hope you have been able to apply some of them. I really appreciate your feedback, and I want to use this opportunity to provide my personal insight on your feedback. I believe we're on the same page regarding the two outcomes of the American rage that you saw on your TV screens, protests and lootings. I assume from your responses that the protest was justifiable. It was the citizens' way of expressing their displeasure about the killing of George Floyd and thousands of Black lives that were prematurely terminated due to various reasons. The aspect of looting was questionable. Some of you want to disregard it and give it a silent treatment, while others vehemently oppose it. I want to provide some insight and in particular use a business approach to give you my thoughts. In companies, when there is a problem, there are various systematic ways they use to perform a deep dive, or what they term root cause analysis. A root cause analysis is an approach for identifying the underlying cause of a problem in order to arrive at the most effective solution. One of these methods is called 5 whys. You start by asking why you had the problem. Then you follow up with another why relating to the answer that you just gave, until you get to the 5th why. But you could go deeper until you feel you have exhausted all the whys. Since most protesters, supporters, and many others agree on the validity of the protest, let's use 5 whys to analyze the underlying reason for the looting. I'll use a few scenarios to demonstrate my thought process. Why were there lootings? Because the looters were angry. Why were the looters angry? Because they were poor. Why were they poor? Because they could not get a job, keep a job, or earn good income. Now, here I gave 3 responses. They all interrelated, but let's keep the thought process going one at a time. So I'll follow the line one at a time. So why couldn't they get a job? Because they lacked adequate skills. Why did they lack adequate skills? Because they grew up in poor neighborhoods where trainings were inadequate. Okay, so we knew that it might be training related, it might be the neighborhood related, so we can use that to solve the problem, or we can even dig further. But I'm going to stop there because we are the 5th why on that line. So let's take the other middle one. Why couldn't they keep a job? Because they were discriminated against on the job. Why were they discriminated against? Because they were minorities and they couldn't perform their jobs adequately. Okay, so if it's due to not being able to perform their jobs adequately, then we probably could solve that. If it's because they're minority, I'm not too sure what you can do. If they're minority, it's just who they are. Let's explore the income part. Why couldn't they earn a good income? Because there were pay and opportunity inequities on the job. Why are there pay and opportunity inequities on the job? Because they are minority and couldn't perform their jobs adequately. Okay, so you already understand the thought process here. If it's minority, there's not much you can do about it. It's just who they are. If it's due to their inability to perform their jobs adequately, then there's a solution to that. Okay, let me share another thought with you. This will literally blow your mind. And I think this might be the underlying issue that we have. So let's start the 5 whys again. Why were there lootings? The looters were angry. Why were the looters angry? Because of the killing of George Floyd. Now, I don't think the killing of George Floyd is sufficient because there have been many like George Floyds that were killed. Some resulted in some protests and lootings. Others, nothing really happened. So I want to assume that the anger was not only because of George Floyd, but I think it was plausible to include many other blacks that cannot be identified. So in response to this why, They say, why were the looters angry? Then I would say because of the killing of George Floyd and many others like him that were killed. Okay, why was George Floyd and many others like him killed? Because Floyd and many others had a fake $20 bill. They were walking in the park. They were selling cigarettes in the sidewalk. Okay, let's stop right there. Let's use Floyd as an example. Trying to spend a fake $20 bill cannot be a valid reason because you don't kill people for such things. The judgment for trying to spend a fake $20 bill is definitely not death penalty. So also walking in the park or selling cigarettes. So those cannot be a valid response to the why here. What do they all have in common? I think it might be the color of their skin. Let's assume. So let's take the response to this particular why to be because they were black. Okay, why do blacks get killed for being black? Because the killers assume blacks to be criminals. Oh, even though death penalty is not the judgment for being a criminal in all instances, but let's just continue the thought process. Why do the killers assume blacks to be criminals? Because stereotypically and from history, blacks were assumed to be criminals and more. In fact, quoting from the 1798 Encyclopedia Britannica on Google Books, the word Negro was defined as follows: a name given to a variety of the human species who are entirely black, are found in the torrid zone, especially in that part of Africa which lies within the tropics. In the complexion of Negroes, we meet various shades, but they likewise differ from other men in all features of their face: round cheeks, high cheekbones, a forehead somewhat elevated, a short, broad, flat nose, thick lips, small ears, ugliness, and irregularity of shape characterize their external appearance. The Negro women have their loins greatly depressed, very large buttocks, which give the back the shape of a saddle. Vice is the most notorious sin to be the portion of this unhappy race: idleness, treachery, revenge, cruelty, impudence, that's another word for impoliteness, stealing, lying, profanity, debauchery, another word for wickedness, nastiness, and intemperance, another word for greed or gluttony, are said to have extinguished the principles of natural law and to have silenced the reproofs of conscience. They are strangers to every sentiment of compassion and are an awful example of the corruption of man when left to himself. So you can see the underlying reason why blacks are being killed. If you use the 5 why method, you will come up with the true cause of the issue, which will lead to a more sustainable solution. I am black. While the description of my physical features may be up for debate, my character is definitely not up for debate. I'm not a thief, neither am I a liar, a glutton, and I'm not greedy. I'm definitely not a criminal, so my life and those of other blacks should not be terminated based on assumptions or perceptions. As you know, law and order was used as a resolution approach in 1968. If it was an appropriate solution, we will not be having this discussion today. To engage law and order as the solution to this same problem that persisted for over 400 years does not appear to be the right approach. In fact, does it sound appropriate to use law and order to resolve the issue of perception? They did not steal, but they were perceived to be thieves. Let's assume they're ugly. Does law and order solve that perception? How about the issue of anomaly to the human race? Does law and order solve that problem? You can see why we cannot jump to resolve the symptom. We need to understand the root cause if we want to arrive at a sustainable solution. Using the same approach to solve the same problem, which gives the same unfavorable outcome, does not appear logical. We need to go deeper if we want a sustainable solution. Try the 5 whys or 7 whys or 10 whys in your small or large circles, in your cities, in your states and various constituents. We can come to a sustainable outcome. I hope we can leave a good legacy of wisdom to the coming generations. I'll appreciate your feedback. Have a blessed day. Thank you. Bye-bye. Hey, welcome. We must open in prayer. So I'm going to invite Reverend Oluwabukola Fajimi of Dios to lead us in this solemn moment. Over to you, Reverend.
Almighty Father, creator of heavens and the earth, We invite you to start and bless this conference on Black Esteem from the beginning to the end. Abundantly anoint the heart, mind, and mouth of the speakers as they deliver inspiring words from above. Unclog the ears of the listeners. We will internalize in all they have to say to us today. Bless the conveners of Black Esteem Conference. Turn the hearts of your people back to you as we deliberate on the importance of revealing up godly characters towards all human race. We appreciate this great, iconic opportunity and give all the glory, honor, praise, love, and power to your holy name. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Rev. Welcome to our first Global Black Affairs Conference themed Black Esteem. The conference is hosted by Your Black Matters. As you probably can guess, everyone has a Black matter. At the minimum, our anthropologists informed us about OOA, the Out of Africa concept. That is, the first couple or the first people evolved from Africa. And through the process of migration, we have all the different racial groups that we carry today. So we all have a Black matter. So don't ever forget OOA, Out of Africa. For those of you that are Christians, you may also agree with OOA, which probably means Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden all originated from Africa. On August 1st, YBM, Your Black Matters, launched a podcast of solutions on all issues relating to the Black race and titled it Reimagining Black Relations. The podcast guests are business executives, social influencers, and spiritual leaders. YBM and RBR brought us to this point where we are speaking on Black Esteem. Just for some very quick logistics, the agenda for the conference, and specifically the speaker's profile, you'll be able to see it on the website, yourblackmatters.com. So just click on the conference when you get there and you'll be able to see the information. I will introduce the speakers by their names, titles, and the topics they'll be addressing. You should all be able to ask questions using the Q&A button. When you post your question, please include the speaker you are addressing the question to. So if it's for Dr. Ken, please put question for Dr. Ken and post your questions. We'll collate them and answer as many as we can at the end. We also have a brief 30-second poll that we would like you to take at the end. So please stick around for that. And finally, we have 2 breaks in between for entertainment. You will not want to miss it. Without further delay, join me to welcome Dr. Ken Harris. He's the CEO and president of the National Business League. He will be speaking on untapped intellectual wealth. Take it over, Ken.
Thank you so much for this invitation to appear before this august body. Your Black Matters not only is intrinsic to today's times, but is representative of what our ancestors have sacrificed and the leadership that is in front of us with Dr. Francesca. Thank you so much for your leadership, bringing us all to the table to have this most important dialogue. I'm thinking why I'm here today is because of my position in society as I lead the nation's oldest and most historic Black organization in the country, founded by the iconic Booker T. Washington. And so this helps me in terms of setting the stage for my talk to you today around the intellectual capacities of wealth, and most importantly, our trajectory in terms of Black business and entrepreneurship. Today, I think, is a unique opportunity for us to approach this understanding that we stand on the shoulders of many who have come before us. Here in the United States, our tremendous and profound story does not start with slavery. That is absolutely important in this dialogue as a Black and melanated population are returning back to our original prowess in society. With that, I am both proud to have a good friend of mine who referred me to this opportunity, which is Dr. Eric Montgomery. Thank you so much for your leadership and connectivity. I also want to thank the distinguished guests and speakers and panelists who will also bring us a breath of knowledge as we engage to not only contribute original thought, but at the same time to converge our thoughts together towards a collective movement. In terms of What my dialogue will be about today is that you all will have a clarity and full understanding of Black business in the United States and the potential of what our economic opportunities look like throughout the diaspora, Africa, and our connectivity into the future economy that we will all create together. As changing demographics have created a huge opportunity for us in the marketplace, as we have seen, Black people here in the United States have been forced to recognize three major crises. One dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic, which has not only been a health crisis for Black folks, but it has also been an economic crisis as well, as we have witnessed not just social distancing, but economic distancing in this country. The other aspect of the health and the economic crisis that has come before us is the racial unrest that is still systemic and institutionalized for well over 400 years in this country, as Black folks have given much of their lives standing on their ancestors' shoulders for complete liberation of all humanity. And I think one thing that we can be proud of is the young people who are shaking down white supremacy and racism to its core, allowing for us to witness the type of not only forceful and fearlessness towards total liberation of Black people, but we also see the changing of the ivory tower. We also see the changing of traditional institutions. We also see the discussion of economic equity, inclusion, and inequality in this country being challenged at its core, which is a significant point in time. One, I relatively give that as a statement to say that the fight continues and our ancestors fight for us to return back to our natural state as Black people, the original people, and the founders of civilization, to realize where we are in the world, but most importantly, how important we are to the United States of America and the rest of the globe. So with that, I set that context in place. This is a huge opportunity for us to realize that through all of our struggles, through every movement, we can achieve towards the fulfillment of the full liberation of Black people. And if that is not the focus, then I don't know what should be. And to reach that full liberation, my thesis and theology towards that spiritualization and realization of that is economic and entrepreneurial independence and reclamation. And so with that, as I lead the oldest and largest Black business organization in the country, we are going to go forward to make sure that we realize our economic potential and we secure for future generations the economic prosperity that is necessary for us to realize our social, educational, political, and socioeconomic opportunities and fulfillment and quality of life that is due to us as a people and a global community. And so with that, as key drivers of economic growth, Black businesses have a unique role to play in catalyzing inclusive growth in all communities. We must embrace this role. It is a national imperative that Black businesses make the economy work better for all Americans and even our home in Africa. Even as the national economy grows at historic rates, many communities are faced with elevated poverty and the continued loss of jobs and businesses. And now more than ever, my organization, the National Business League, must address societal challenges, leveraging Black business development to solve them. The American economy cannot remain healthy without the continued development of Black businesses and international and global opportunities and linkages of Black businesses and African businesses throughout the diaspora. As the National Business League prepares and has celebrated on August 23rd this year, 120 years, I reflect upon my legacy and the legacy of the great Booker T. Washington, who realized post-slavery here in the Americas that we could reach our economic destiny and economic independence as a people. During the past 5 and more decades, over a century, the National Business League has undertaken a significant long-term initiative focused on creating greater economic opportunity for Black businesses to help create an economy for all Americans. We have leveraged our mission as not only an entity that is going to connect the dots in all industries and sectors across the United States, but to finally link those opportunities and capacity to our homeland in Africa and throughout the diaspora. Today, I'll give relative statistics to enumerate the tremendous focus on Black business and the amount of growth even prior to COVID-19 and what must take place in the future. In addition, we have provided not only this information to incorporate the tools that are necessary for us to collect the data that's necessary for us to move forward, but we must be data-driven in all of our approaches. Contemplating the National Business League's legacy, I have a deep sense of pride in our accomplishments over the past 120 years. And it also makes me grateful for the extraordinary dedication, passion, and talent, not only of my staff, but the hundreds and thousands and millions of Black businesses here in the United States of America for over a century, significant and impactful and dedicated to public and private service and a meaningful contribution to the American economy. I am tremendously proud of the National Business League's rich history, founded on top of the legacy of Booker T. Washington and the Tuskegee machine that has given us a breath of opportunity as we realize that the revolution will not be televised, the revolution will be digitized. And so this is a huge opportunity for us to transition and evolve as a 120-year-old organization into the technology, knowledge-based, and digital economy. I look forward to working with all who are participating today in this particular conference, because your Black does matter. And as we witness and we stand on the shoulders of so many ancestors who sacrificed their blood, sweat, and tears so that we are afforded the opportunities to continue the liberation struggle of our people to free humanity from the systematic, institutional, and structural oppressions that exist even today. Since our inception, we have focused on the causation factors that underline the National Business League, and we're dedicated and very supportive of the advancement of Black business. The National Business League has traditionally pursued these goals through a range of research activities, community, business engagement, and through hands-on support programs that we have launched for over 120 years. Building on this rich history, the NBL is entering into an exciting new challenge using knowledge-based technology, institutional capital, and expanding our role into public policy development and analysis. Based on the state of Black business, we will have an understanding of the 2002 and 7 and 2012 U.S. Census Bureau statistics, which gives us the underlying statistics both on employer, non-employer, statistic and revenue generations, and descriptives on statistical measurements. Empirical evidence shows that Black and minority communities continue to be overrepresented in disadvantaged socio and economic cohorts. Understanding these challenges is both an opportunity and an imperative. The opportunity lies in the insights that can be drawn from the successes and failures of Black and minority entrepreneurs. Research suggests that 70 to 80% of the disparity in economic outcomes for Black and minority entrepreneurs is related to several key factors, with restricted access to capital as being chief amongst them. This restricted capital access included individuals and firm traits, creditworthiness, personal and family wealth. This factor impacted all business development, but are disproportionately founded in Black and minority communities. For example, a significant negative impact on the profitability for restricted access to financial capital is reported by 10.1% of non-minority firms, 10.84% of Black and African firms. Because of Black and minority entrepreneurship experiences, these factors come into a sharper empirical focus. The opportunity exists to leverage this data in designing policy for economic advancement of Black and minority communities and the nation as a whole. The imperative is reflected in the economic data. According to the widely accepted recent population projections and demographic transition underway, we see that Black and minority communities comprise the majority of the US population in the next 20 to 30 years. The future of capital formation, employment, and economic growth for all Americans, in addition to the potential for the US economy to respond to a rapidly changing global economic and geopolitical landscape, will increasingly depend on the success and dynamism of Black and minority-owned enterprises. Economic development is not a zero-sum game, but proactively addressing market distortions that create barriers between Black and minority-owned business growth through research, policy, and programmatic support. An opportunity exists to better support sustainable U.S. economic growth and ensure improved outcomes in economic well-being and social justice for all Americans. Now, relative to what I just gave as an introduction, underlines the tremendous impact that we must make as a community. It also recognizes that the National Business League, which was founded by the iconic Booker T. Washington on August the 23rd, 1900 in Boston, Massachusetts, which predated the U.S. Chamber of Commerce by 12 years, continues to strive to enhance the professional, commercial, and economic prosperity of Black people and the communities that they serve. Although we know that this organization grew to more than 600 chapters in every local community across the country, now it is more important that we expand that local outreach to more of a global outreach across the country. This is why when I took the national helm as the national president and CEO, and the 12th president since Booker T. Washington of this organization, was to transition us with a 3-year plan into the knowledge-based and technology and digital economy. This will allow for us to not only have a presence in our 5 regions, Atlanta, Georgia, the Southern region, Detroit, Michigan, the Midwest region, Los Angeles, California, the Western region, the international region, and the entire Pan-African diaspora, with our next international office in Africa and our headquarter office in Washington, D.C. as our Eastern region. Our operations will have increased in all 50 states and internationally, and our 120,000 members nationwide will grow to more than with access to more than 2.6 million Black businesses that currently exist in the country, but more importantly, to more than 46,000 Black businesses that exist throughout the entire diaspora. We have over 365 local chapters, all of those of which will now be able to move into the future in this digital platform. Celebrating 120 years of service, we have now adopted a platform to prosperity. That platform is holistic entrepreneurship and training, business and supplier development, community reinvestment and accountability, economic equity and inclusion and initiatives, economic advancement of policy agenda, resource deployment and technical assistance, talent placement and acquisition, global commerce and trade, contracting and procurement amongst the private and public sector. Launching the NBL's economic freedom movement is our 2021 plan. So just as a people have led the most successful liberation movements throughout history, as a part of the next revolution, the National Business League believes the achievement of economic freedom will come from Black businesses and the communities that take action, assume their rightful place in the digital economy, and leave a legacy for generations to come. As Dr. Huey P. Newton would say, the revolution always remains with the youth. And we all know through Sankofa, in order to move forward, you must go back to reclaim and learn in order to push forward. Our vision is more clear, as we want to see a world where economic freedom for Black businesses is a right for all and not a privilege for the few. And we are purposeful as we challenge Black businesses throughout the world to rise up and reach their economic destiny. Again, our motto is the revolution won't be televised, it will be digitized. And we must rise up and become economically free. Black business economic statistics and ownership is on the rise. The number of Black and African-American firms grew 34.5% between 2007 and 2012, from 1.9 million to 2.6 million Black businesses in 2012. Now we are up for our 2020 census statistical improvements as well, which will show an even further increase. In contrast, the total number of firms in the United States increased 2.0% during the same period, from 27.1 million in 2007 to 27.6 million in 2012. However, the proportion of Black and African-American owned businesses account for 9.4% of all firms, which is still below the 13.1% of Black and African-American share of the US adult population based on Census Bureau statistics in 2012. These business figures are from the Survey of Business Owners, which provide a broad socioeconomic picture of business owners across the nation, and in part of the Census Bureau's economic census conducted every 5 to 10 years, drawing upon a sample of 1.7 million employer and non-employer businesses. The Survey of Business Owners collects the data of the firms, the receipts, the payroll, the employment, as well as gender, ethnic, race, and veteran status of firms. It is most an authoritative source of data on businesses by the demographic characteristics of the owner. First, results from the 2012 Survey of Business Owners were released not too long ago and will be released again after the census is conducted in 2020. This blog of information that I am presenting takes a deeper dive in which you can look up these statistics yourself through the Survey of Business Owners, through the U.S. Department of Commerce, also through the Survey of Business Owners, and the Census Bureau itself. So, who contributed to the number of Black and African-American owned businesses? Well, let us smile. Women. The number of Black women-owned firms climbed 66.9%, from 900,000 in 2007 to 1.5 million in 2012. Additionally, these 1.5 million Black female-owned businesses accounted for 58.9% of the nation's 2.6 million Black businesses across the country. Nationally, women own just over a third, which is 35.8% or 9.9 million of all firms in 2012. Representative of this, Black women are the fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs in the entire country, regardless of race, creed, color, or sexual orientation or any identification. Black women have become the sole source of opportunity and entrepreneurship, but still lag far behind in revenue generation and access to capital. The sales and receipts of these businesses tell a different story, that while a number of Black and African-American firms represented 9.4% of all firms, that 150.2 billion in sales generated from these firms were less than 0.5% of the total sales of firms at 33.5 trillion in 2012. Included in the grand total are publicly held and other firms that are classified by race or gender, ethnicity, or veteran status. And with 20.6 trillion in sales, these firms amounted for almost 2/3, 64.3% of all total sales for all firms in 2012. When looking solely at firms classifiable by gender, ethnicity, race, and veteran status, sales from Black and African-American owned businesses made up 1.3% of the total sales of $12 trillion here in the United States of America. This disparity is also visible between genders. Even though Black and African-American owned businesses were predominantly women owned at 58.9%, the reverse was true for revenue. Approximately 2/3, 66.7% of the 150.2 billion in sales generated by Black and minority owned firms were from male businesses, $100.1 billion in 2012. In addition to the gender distribution in economic industries are spread differently amongst these demographics. The top 3 money-making sectors for all those firms classifiable by gender, ethnicity, and race, and veteran-owned status were wholesale, trade, and NAICS 52, which are the NAICS codes, with $2.8 trillion in retail trade, also $2.1 trillion in manufacturing, also $1.3 trillion in sales total of 2012. However, neither wholesale trade nor manufacturing ranked among the top 3 for any Black or African-American owned firm. Instead, healthcare, social assistance, retail, professional, scientific, and technical services total $24.2 billion, which is $17.2 billion and $15.7 billion in revenue, respectively, with the top sales generators of each group. This is just the sliver of data available through the survey of business owners, geographic detail down to the economic place of a community with at least 2,500 people. And the sizes of firms and levels in receipts come back to a space. Additional blogs and information can be found by this resource. And additional information on Black and minority firms, we must put into context the tremendous opportunity that lays before us today. One, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, Black businesses were growing 3 times the national rate, with Black women entrepreneurs being the fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs in the entire country. With that being said, think about where we have come as a people post-slavery 150 years later. We were promised right off of the plantation and emancipation 40 acres and a mule, which we did not receive. And it was actually confiscated and pulled away from us. Then we were indoctrinated with Black codes and a Freedmen's Bank, a supposedly Black-owned bank sponsored by the federal government, ran into the ground, again, contributing to the historical distrust of the traditional banking market amongst Black people and entrepreneurs. Then we realized Jim Crow segregation and KKK. So no matter if we were free off the plantations, not only were we issued the opportunity to not participate in the economic mainstream of society, we were also terrorized, lynched, murdered, and put in serious economic constraints to any type of quality of life and satisfaction of economic prosperity and progress. But Black folks, we don't give up. We have fought, and we have fought to the point of where we're sick and tired, and our young people are sick and tired today. We will not stop until we reach the full economic liberation of our people. And this, I believe, is the final frontier, the frontier of what I call the third Reconstruction. The first Reconstruction period in which we had snatched away from us and thrown into a segregative, non-economically viable, policy-oriented institution, system, and structure that precluded us from making an honest living and starting our entrepreneurial and business dreams. The second revolution, or what I would call Reconstruction, was civil, no economic rights, which means we were given civil liberties to a certain degree with no economic fabric attached to it or policy making attached to it. Then we were given affirmative half action, where affirmative action and civil rights have been the biggest benefactor of white women as opposed to Black people who gave their lives to fight for all of the ethnicities and humanities that all races, creeds, and colors benefit from today. And we think on top of the movements that have taken place, where the Black Power movement took place, where we realized in America, we will no longer settle for a submissive and substandard and lack of quality of life for generations to come. We will return to our original prowess in this land, and we will not stop until we have the full liberation of our people. And although we have civil rights today, we look at the evolution of racism, which has become institutional, structural, and systematic. And even 50 years later, post-civil rights, we find ourselves facing the same economic oppressive constraints that are restricted and controlled by the system itself. And that's why our focus today must change. We must change our directive to focus on economic empowerment and prosperity and quality of life for our people. And regardless if COVID-19 has had a disproportionate impact on our community, and regardless if we see the continued oppression and murders of unarmed Black men and women across this country, including George Floyd, which sparked a global unrest in this country, Black lives do matter, and your Black life matters as well. We must aim for true economic inclusion and equity in the marketplace and access to the same platforms that create economic wealth. And at the same time, we must build our own, and that will start with United States businesses, and more particularly, the 2.6 million Black businesses across the country connecting with Africa and the African Union and our intellectual and economic thought thinkers and innovators on the continent. It is absolutely critical that we start to research and devise a plan for the full economic liberation of the Black race and all people of African descent that are throughout this land and throughout the globe. And with that being said, we must challenge white supremacy and racism to its core. We would not be where we are today without the strong men and women throughout the continent and on the lands of the United States of America, as to which Black people are indigenous. As we reclaim our place in this world, we must focus on the economic fabric of this country and the laws that create the opportunities before us. And so with that being said, I want to thank everyone today for taking the time to listen for the not only presentation that I gave you, which is just a breadth of the economic prosperity, history, and objectives that we need to attain as a people. But more importantly, our focus must change, because to reach educational, social, political, and socioeconomic success, we must gain economic power. And economic power will come from all of the millions of entrepreneurs that exist today and helping them reach capacity, scope, and scale, but also creating millions of new Black entrepreneurs throughout the country and throughout the globe and the diaspora. But most importantly, we must finally connect between Africa and the United States, linking our economic chains together to forge a new economy of prosperity for our people and our communities. Thank you to our ancestors, Booker T. Washington, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, Frantz Fanon, all of our great leaders, Dr. Amos Wilson, and I can go the trajectory of revolutionary soldiers, Malcolm X, you name it, all the way up to Dr. King, Stokely Carmichael, and the list goes on and on. There are fearless heroes and sheroes that have liberated us, both mind, body, soul, and spirit, giving us balance and frequency with the right vibration and energy to unite the world and to free all of humanity.
Dr. Ken Harris, thank you so very much. We're going to be taking the questions at the end. So I want to make sure we get all the speakers in, and then we'll have the opportunity to take all the questions. But you have opened our eyes to a lot of things that we did not even know. And I must say, I am so energized. I'm so ready. And the opportunity is absolutely endless for us. As you all heard Ken say, we must be key drivers of economic growth. There's just no if or buts about it. So I'm really excited. Now, that was a great start to the conference, right? So please post all your questions in the Q&A for Ken. Make sure you put his name to precede the question you're asking. And then we'll be able to route the questions accordingly at the end. Now, I'm going to be calling on Professor Jacob Gordon. He's Professor Emeritus and President and CEO of American Health Coalition. He will be speaking to us on the real history, not the 400-year bump. Over to you, Professor.
Good morning. Thank you so much for your kind invitation and introduction. I want to begin my remarks by talking about history, this 400 years deal. But my hope in this presentation is to connect the importance of history to the development of Black esteem, Black identity, and Black quality of life. My initial remark is to mention two big lies in history. One of them occurred on this date, October 12, 1492, when Columbus was supposed to have discovered America. Now we know that's a big lie. Gave it to Isabella Ferdinand of Spain, made Spain a rich nation. The fact is, Africans were probably here more than 40,000 years before Columbus got here. I think the Africans, maybe they made a mistake. They should have given the New World to Africa. The second big lie is that Black history, enslaved Africans began in Virginia in 1619. That's a big lie. A lot of Africans were here even before the transatlantic slave trade. And even within that context of the plantation history in America, we find that there are many enslaved Blacks and free Blacks in other parts of the colonies. For example, in Florida, about 1565, they were here in the oldest city in the United States, St. Augustine, in Florida. So it's in this context that I really want to talk about what I consider to be two major historical movements that impacted Black esteem and Black identity. The first of these two is colonialism. The second is the transatlantic slave trade itself. Both of these historical movements destroyed African history. They ignored it, they distorted it, and it is not the real history of Africa and peoples of African descent. Africa was characterized as the dark continent without history, they argued, because it has no writing system. What is actually dark about Africa is European ignorance of the great history of Africa as the genesis of the human race. The colonial educational systems that were developed in Africa, they were the foundations for the destruction of African civilization. Those systems claimed that Africa was the antithesis of civilization. In the diaspora, plantation owners, Western historians like Arnold Toynbee, like David Hume, like A.P. Newton of Cambridge, and of course, like Thomas Jefferson, they all concocted and promoted myths of the inherent inferiority of black people everywhere. They advanced the idea that slavery was a necessary evil, that slavery was a divine, benevolent Christian institution. In fact, they misused the Bible to justify the cruel and inhumane institution of slavery. And finally, white racists to globalize racism and continue the spread of lies about the history of Africa and peoples of African descent. The real history must be told. It must begin with the history of Africa before the transatlantic slave trade in the 15th century and before colonialism in Africa. The real history is the centrality of Africa and the diaspora in the development of modern world, modern economy, especially the global north, including the Americas. The history, I submit, is the history of Africa must be based on historical evidence drawn from multidisciplinary or pan-disciplinary sources, including geography, archaeology, sociology, linguistics, languages, art, the great African art, African music, food, science, our oral tradition, DNA, and migration studies. These records have documented the history of the great civilizations in ancient African kingdoms and empires, namely Nubia, Kush in modern Sudan, Marawi, Egypt, Zimbabwe, Songhai, Ghana, Mali, Ethiopia, and many other small kingdoms. The real history is the true story of the great accomplishments of this great civilization. Let me make a few lists. To begin with, the oldest writing system in the world and symbol, Unsibir, was in Africa, even before Europe was born. The ancient, and we are all familiar with this, hieroglyphs. There were languages in Africa, symbols of writing, even before the hieroglyphics. Languages that include Goas, for example. And we also know in history that's not been taught that the richest man, the richest human being in the world at that time was King Mansa Musa of Mali. The development of mathematics, agriculture, engineering, irrigation systems, the family extended system in which we believe that we take care of each other. The great pyramids that we all talk about and we love them. Architecture, our art, our concept of spirituality, the notion of respect for the elder, government by consensus, perhaps the real democratic governance system that the world ever seen. The legendary University of Timbuktu, we talk about education, one of the oldest learning centers in the world. The creation of different monetary systems and the trade within Africa, intra-trade in Africa and world trade. Africans were everywhere, in China, in the Caribbean, trading. The ancient art of Africa, voluntary migration, which was mentioned earlier, exploring the whole world. All of these are accomplishments that are never taught, not even in African curriculum, but almost everywhere, until very recently. It is estimated that the art of African migration was about 50 to 60,000 years ago, based on ancient and modern DNA. The second wave of out of Africa migration was the first migration that we refer to as the transatlantic slave trade into North America long before 1619, as that was firstly presented to us in the 1619 project that was actually done by my good friend Nicole Hannah Jones and the New York Times Magazine. There is an overwhelming evidence that enslaved Africans arrived in different colonies in the Americas at different times, which I alluded to earlier. Africans were not only in North America, they were also in South America. We have evidence of Africans were kings and obas in places like Colombia, Venezuela, and other South American countries. So the African diaspora is very, very broad, and it has helped to enrich. We came here in Africa, not empty-handed. The Africans who came here before the Atlantic slave trade, during the African slave trade, and after the abolition of the slave trade, which came later on after African independence, they came with the sound knowledge of their heritage, rich heritage, their culture, their language, their style of life, their skill. All of those helped to build America and shape American life and thought. The real history also includes the impact of World War I and World War II on Black esteem. Black African diaspora received Western democracy and world economy as they became engaged and died for the wars the European and Americans created. They never created those wars, and yet they were there. I'm pleased to know that the Prime Minister of England, Boris, recently admitted the contributions of Africans into World War I and World War II, and therefore he wants to create a commission towards a racial inclusive society in UK. That's a good call. The rise of African independence and the development of African studies, and some people call some Black studies in all major world universities, institutions of higher learning, also gives us some hope in the pursuit of the real history. And yet, there remains much to be done, including the development of an Afrocentric historiographical method to actually document the rich history of Africa and the African diaspora in schools, in community cultural institutions, and everywhere, from K to 12, so that people can begin to understand the real history, that Columbus never discovered America, that Africans didn't come here with empty heads. They came here with their heritage to make contributions to society. As you heard from the previous speaker, since 1900, we continue to make that contribution into the business world. For me, this is an imperative that we must do something about our history in order to shape the future of Black identity, the future of Black esteem, and the future of Black quality of life. And I thank you for listening.
Oh, thank you, Professor Gordon. That was wonderful. Thank you for taking us straight to our history. We really need to know about that. So I'm sure many of you are really excited to hear some of those, just a snippet, not the whole deal. There's so much more to learn about our history. Please don't forget, post your questions in the Q&A box. I will now call on Dr. Eric Montgomery, an assistant professor at Michigan State University. He'll be speaking on decolonization to counter-colonization. But before I yield to you, Eric, let me share something with you, with everyone. Eric was a guest on the Reimagining Black Relation podcast. Let me show you quickly what I look like before. Can you see me? So this was me when I had the podcast with Eric. And basically what was going on here was that during the podcast, my first introduction actually to Blacks needing to decolonize their mind came from Eric during the interview. So that was me that you are looking at. And this is me now. Can you see? That's me now. I've not braided my hair in over 30 years, but it was necessary for me to model the behavior. You don't often see many Black female executives with this hairdo in the C-suite, right? You usually don't see them there. But the reality of the matter is the Francesca that you saw in this picture you're looking at is still the same Francesca you're looking at today. The only difference is I'm showing you my authentic self, totally. That was not natural. This is all natural. This is all me, totally. So I want to thank you, Eric. I'm sure you are looking at me, the different me too. You're looking at it like, oh my goodness, she's different. Indeed, I am. And I want to thank you for giving me that opportunity to show my authentic self. So at this junction, I'm going to be turning it over to Eric, who will be taking us through what we're talking about, this decolonization and counter-colonization. Over to you, Eric.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fanjinmi. It's been so great meeting you. And I want to extend my gratitude to Dr. Ken Harris, who's been a great man to me, and also to Dr. Omofe Gordon, whose work I've known. Just so to meet you virtually is wonderful. He did such a good job of the historical stuff and the African legacy stuff. That's how you decolonize the mind, folks. That's what counter-colonization is getting to facts, empathy, and getting back to the truth of things. Not just the world's first billionaire and, Congo and Dahomey and oil and Songhai and Ghana, but the fact that we all at our roots come out of Africa. And it's such a beautiful irony that today is Columbus Day, but today is also Native American Day. And where I sit in this land in Michigan, where Dr. Ken Harris went to school and where I teach at Michigan State University is Native American land, what is called Anishinaabe, the three fires of Ottawa, Ojibwa, and Potawatomi. And I ask these ancestors of this sacred land to forgive me if I speak out of turn. And I also want to yield to my ancestors in Western Africa, particularly those in the village of Bechogbe outside of Lome, Togo, Bopiafu. And I asked for the Spirit's acceptance. And I did not come empty-handed during my prayers. I made sure I made proper libations with the little bit of palm wine I have left here. Decolonization. Well, before we can talk about decolonization, we have to talk about what colonization is. And that's the act of establishing a colony or a colony, a settlement, people from one country, put people in another territory under their control. France had many colonies in Africa. We know they divided up the African continent during the Berlin Conference in 1884 and 1885 like a pizza pie, with King Leopold taking the center on Congo, and with German colonies and Spanish and Portuguese. Counter-colonization is to counter that. How do we counter colonization? 500 years of embedded history. It really doesn't start with the Portuguese. For me, racism starts with the Greeks, at least historically. The Greeks could read the hieroglyphics in Egypt and places like that. They didn't want to spread their army out too thin, and that's where racism was concocted, even though most of Europe and much of the world were literally living in caves compared to these legacies of Africa. So in light of COVID, when we talk about structural and systemic racism, we hear so much of these words, and the intersectionality between gender and class and race and all of these things. Racism produces rates of morbidity, mortality, and overall well-being. Science proves that all around the world. Eliminating racism is therefore essential, not only to human rights, but to achieving health equity. So it requires new paradigms of thought. How do we decolonize the mind? How do we decolonize and counter-colonize these structural things that are with us? One thing that's been utilized recently is critical race theory. It's growing. It's a transdisciplinary race equity methodology that originated in legal studies, but anthropologists like myself, social scientists are using it, people in global and public health are using it. And critical race theory's tools for conducting research and practice are intended to elucidate contemporary racial phenomena, to expand the vocabulary with which to discuss racial concepts and to challenge racial hierarchies. It was Oswald Spenger's published book, The Decline of the West, more than 100 years ago in 1918, that talked about the fall of Western civilization. Christendom was also supposedly mandated to consume and eliminate heathendom. This was the idea, this God-given, providentially assigned thing. So the evidence of Christian nationalism in the United States based on the Bible and Christianity, and it's tied to colonialism and to conquest, are intricate and intimate and are lived out throughout today. I want to talk about an African Renaissance, in Greek again, naissance en français, a rebirth, to be born again. Folks throughout the diaspora in Brazil, in Cuba, in Black American cities, in West Africa, East Africa are talking about a new African Renaissance, an archaic revival, a revisitation of the past history that Dr. Gordon was talking about. We stand on the shoulders of giants. I think of the great American revolutionary Grace Lee Boggs and her book, The Next American Revolution. Sustainable activism for the 21st century. She says the next revolution cannot be based on expanding markets and flexible accumulation and destruction of the environment, but we need to revisit these old native ways of thinking. She's talking about Native Americans, but also African and Black and brown peoples. And she says these are the time to grow our souls. She asked the question, what time is it on the clock of the world? Not in your world, in your self-centered world, but in an other-centered world. And really, it's going to be about private property. Blacks were never, before we can talk about reparations in the U.S., we have to talk about reclamation in the United States. And all around the world, including in Africa, we have rural people and people from the farms and the bush moving into the cities to seek work. They do not own land. They do not have land. So this is really about property. The UN says that there's only 17 territories left that are technically colonies, only 2 million people left in the world, not represented by the United Nations, but we know neo-colonialism is as real as any of that. The history of non-literate people, of people of color, of colonized people is really difficult to commit to talk, especially in a realm in which Arundhati Roy has said, postmodern world, Arundhati Roy is a subaltern theorist, Indian theorist, has said that, you know the story of Rumpelstiltskin where he falls asleep and all of this straw is strewn into gold. And what Arundhati Roy says for the subaltern, for the marginalized people, instead of turning straw into gold, they're turning gold into straw in India and in places like Africa. And Rumpelstiltskin is got television eyes and a newspaper nose and satellites for ears and a surround sound megaphone mouth that drowns out the sound of the rest of the world so that you can't hear it when they're hungry or starving or dying. And King Rumpel is rolling his R's in the North American way. And what she's talking about there, she's talking about domination. She's talking about hegemony, the neo-colonial ways in which power is invoked. So my concern with this talk for the next few minutes, and I'm going to wrap it up in about 2 minutes, is to bring what Frantz Fanon calls the wretched of the earth, the poor and the forgotten folks. In my case, the voodoo worshipers of Western Africa. Just as Black people are discriminated against all around the world, as Dr. Harris and Dr. Gordon have shown, no religion has been more maligned, more misunderstood than voodoo and Orisha, and their cognizance of Macumbe and Obia and Santeria and all these different manifestations in the quote-unquote New World. None. And that's why I got brought into Africa. People went into trance and said, you need to come and speak the truth about this. And I thought when they went into trance that it was diabolical. It scared me. That's how strong the Christian power, the colonization of the mind was on me. And I've dedicated my life to that. So I want to build on Fanon first. Second, I want to talk a teeny bit for a second about colonization as a process with the dynamics of immediate and ongoing interaction of indigenous and alien peoples. And then I also want to talk about my research into voodoo and social justice activism and Black Lives Matter. And I'm not going to talk about that now, but you can look me up and ask me more about that later. Essentially, 95% of the world has been mystified and maligned. So we look at racialized and genderless scenario where we have to amplify the voices of the others. I try to do that in my research in Africa. I try to do that in my research in inner city Detroit, as many of my students who are on this know. I do want to let you know that we have to see the togetherness of it. There's a lot of comparative studies of African Americans and Dalit untouchable literatures going on, comparing the isolation and the alienation that people in lower caste in India are facing with Black Americans and with people of color all around the world. This comparative research is important. We stand on the shoulders of giants, and I want to remind you that the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement was created by Tarana Burke, an African American woman. The term hashtag Black Lives Matter, BLM, their founders, Alicia Garza, Patricia Cullors, and Opal Tamedi are Black women, okay? And the very idea of intersectionality, of assessing all these things together, that is at the forefront of these international conversations about racial justice, identity politics, and policing, was none other than Kimberly Crenshaw, also an African-American woman. So we have to amplify the voices of others and look at things from the inside if we want to decolonize the mind. So I read this book, Playing the Whore, not just about human trafficking and victimless women, but about women who have been prostituted and overcome prostitution from the inside. I read books like I Shall Not Hate, a man who lost 3 of his children to an Israeli tank attack, the first Palestinian doctor to serve in Israel. And I befriended him and try to include him in things. When I look at what's going on with Black Lives Matter, I look at it through a Black and a queer lens, like Charlize Carruthers, who's been at the forefront of what's going on with the Black Lives Matter and these young kids who are out there fighting every day for rights. And small minds discuss events, small minds discuss people, average minds discuss events, and great minds discuss ideas. So I encourage you to look at the ideas behind Black Lives Matter as well. To conclude, in Africa and Ewe, they say the beard doesn't tell stories to the eyebrow. The leaf does not tell a root what to do. A river never flows backwards, but also, no matter how many times the leopard crosses the river, he or she never changes his spots. So let us not be naive amidst this great reawakening that these structural barriers are not real, and it's going to take one hell of a collective effort for us to overcome this, and to find the economic liberation that Dr. Harris was talking about. It's also necessary to understand your personhood and real history and real facts, because science and facts matter, as Dr. Gordon said as well. Thank you. Bless you. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the panelists. And thank you to all the participants and panelists for being here. And my students who are doing their book review in the social movements class, make sure you take a few copious notes here. And this will be recorded and made available if you need it later. Thank you. And please, for the next for the next global conference, all of you who are attending here today, send this to at least 10 of your friends. Let's grow that and get the maximum number that we can have on Zoom and meet regularly, so that we can exchange ideas and learn from one another.
Oh my goodness. Eric is always fantastic to say, so much knowledge, so much information. Don't forget, post your questions in Q&A. And make sure you put who you're addressing the question to. Our next speaker is also somebody that's very dear. She's the first female dean of the Faculty of Social Services at the renowned University of Lagos in Nigeria. Professor Fumi Bameka will speak on social decisions and Black esteem. I'm going to yield over to our prof now.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to participate in this conference. It's actually Faculty of Social Sciences. Greetings to all panelists and all participants. I want to start with the Black esteem issue and then I'll go on to social decisions. Now, when we talk about Black esteem, we're talking about the self-esteem that a Black person holds because of their race or heritage. And self-esteem is an individual's personal assessment or evaluation of their own worth or value, which could be positive or negative. It describes a complex mental state of how one perceives oneself and is influenced by self-efficacy, self-respect, self-image, and so on. Now, based on the looking glass self-theory, just call it, a person's self grows out of their perception of the opinion of others about them as it relates with them. Now, if we apply this to race relations, it simply means that racial minority groups are expected to internalize the negative views of the culturally dominant groups about them. And then given the historical factors of slavery and segregation, as well as the contemporary, including discrimination, negative stereotypes, and prejudice, they'll be expected to have stigmatization. But contrary to these expectations, as the literature has shown, Blacks consistently report higher levels of self-esteem than whites. Of course, that cannot be allowed to just go. A number of possible explanations have been preferred for the Black self-esteem advantage, but each explanation has its own limitations. I'll not be able to take all the explanations. I'll take a few and then just move on. There's an explanation of Blacks' membership of stigmatized group, which makes them self-protective, that Blacks maintain a high self-esteem by comparing their outcomes with those of people in the same group, and they attribute personal failures to prejudice. Other reasons are the positivity of racial identity and cultural differences in self-concepts. Now, beyond the level of self-esteem, another interesting thing is that the degree to which an individual's self-esteem is contingent on meeting certain standards is an important predictor of behavior. Although Blacks generally reported high levels of self-esteem than white, relative to whites, Blacks reported self-esteem which was less contingent on the approval of others, physical appearance, on family, love, support, but was more contingent on God's love. And this simply suggests that self-esteem is more strongly correlated with religiosity amongst white than among Blacks, than white. But the fact that Blacks base their self-esteem less on the approval of others could be a strategy to protect them from discrimination and racial prejudice. In addition, the socialization strategies adopted by Black parents who teach their children not to base their self-esteem on the approval of others may also be advantageous. Because by not looking at others, by not looking to others for approval, then their self-esteem will be could actually be high. Then if you look at self-esteem also among the Blacks, it is said that self-esteem and efficacy and self-efficacy, even though they are generally correlated among African Americans specifically, that they tend to report high levels of self-esteem or relatively low personal efficacy. Why is this so? This is so because social prejudice has no influence on their self-esteem, but discrimination and social inequality affect their personal efficacy, by depriving them of opportunities that will make them feel efficacious. Now, there are a number of social decisions that Black people make that can impact negatively on their esteem, but I'm just going to take one. I'll look at skin whitening or skin lightening, the process of using chemical substances to lighten the skin by altering the epidermis. This is common. It exists in Black communities in countries with diverse population. It exists in Black societies in Africa, even without mixed population. Now, why does this preference for skin lightening, why does it happen? before we go to the why, it's an old practice. It's not new. In fact, it's been traced to the transatlantic slave trade, where the slave traders and the colonizers considered the slaves and the colonized people as inferior and ugly on account of their skin color. And then by the turn of the 20th century, skin lightening had become very popular among women of all colors globally. But by the 1930s, skin lightening became less prevalent among white women as skin tanning became the new form of white privilege. It became indicative of a healthier lifestyle, of a more leisure lifestyle. And so skin lightening became associated with people of color and was prevalent in Black communities in the US, also prevalent in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, in the 1960s, the time when we had the civil rights agitation, part of what the Black communities, especially in the US, had to face, had to accept, was the realities of their Blackness without accepting the inferiority tag that racism had given them. And this was the time, this was the context when James Brown came up with the song, Say It Loud, I'm Black and Proud. That was a kind of revival, of Black pride. It was a kind of revival that awakened in people, this pride in being Black. But then in other places, what was happening is that skin lightening was still going on. In sub-Saharan Africa, skin whitening became so prevalent, and cosmetics with mercury flooded the markets. The beauty industry, it took over the beauty industry, and the traditional methods of keeping the skin glowing, became regarded as unsophisticated. But the danger of skin lightening products led to the ban placed on these products in African countries. For example, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Rwanda, Ghana, all had placed bans on skin lightening products at different points in time. In 1975, South Africa banned skin lightening products. And then in the 1980s, activity in South Africa, inspired by the Black consciousness, and collaborated with medical professionals, they opposed skin lightening as part of the anti-apartheid movement. And then in the 1990s, skin lightening products were again banned in South Africa. But skin lightening products are back in South Africa, because with a history of segregation and colorism, the shade of a person's complexion could actually have social and political implications. So skin lightening is still prevalent in South Africa. In Nigeria, skin lightening is also still prevalent. Skin lightening products were banned in Nigeria about 1982, but the products never really left the market. The perception that light-skinned people are more attractive than dark-skinned people, and that they have more privileges in terms of being appraised as beautiful, sustains the practice. And all over, skin lightening is a multi-billion-dollar global industry. The media, entertainment industry, all complicit. Project Light Skin has been better, and thereby they're rewarding skin bleaching or skin toning through the glamorization of light-skinned people. Advertisements through the media and in collaboration with the cosmetic and entertainment industry also project light skin as beautiful and indicative of a higher social status. And so these are some of the reasons why it persists. Now, body modification or alteration is one way in which people who lack confidence seek to boost their self-image. That dissatisfaction with physical appearance, it could be indicative of being at the pre-conscious stage of Black consciousness. And such people tend to have a problem of a negative self-identity informed by a poor self-image. They seek to conform to the standard of beauty that is presented before them. But how can this be mitigated? The issue of poor self-image must be dealt with, because persons with poor self-image do not think they are good enough. They have these feelings of inadequacies, and this must stop. Beauty must be redefined. The redefinition must not link beauty with light skin. We must encourage African values. African values must experience a kind of renaissance. There must be a rebirth of pride in all that represents Blackness. There must be positive role models. Celebrities in all contexts, everywhere in Africa, in the US, wherever, they must promote Black esteem. And public education must go on the dangers of skin bleaching. Thank you.
Oh, Professor, thank you so much. That was actually really an eye-opener when I began to hear a lot about the issue on skin whitening and all that. There's so much to unpack there. And I know you just introduced just a little bit of it to us. And I know that there's so much more for us to hear on that subject. At this junction, I'm going to introduce to you Dr. Charles Ume. He's the Chairman, National Association of Clinical Psychiatrists in Lagos Chapter. He will be dissecting some social decisions and the health implications of our decisions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fajmi, for this opportunity. And this is to thank everybody who has spoken and for this topic we are deliberating on today. I'll be looking at social decisions and health. And this is to thank Professor Bameke for actually laying the foundation for my discourse. Okay? And if I will start from that social decision perspective, we discover that human beings are social animals that depend on one another to meet their needs. And towards meeting these needs, social decisions are made, which can impact on them positively or negatively, and they are mediated by several factors, including social influences, just like Professor Bameke has highlighted. Now, at this point, the questions are, why do people act the way they do? What causes an individual to make certain decisions or to exhibit certain types of behavior? The field of psychology offers so many tools and framework for investigating these conditions or these questions, including the concept of social influences. And social influences can be seen as an individual's attitude, beliefs, or behavior, which could be modified by the presence or actions of others. And in this way, if you look at the topic, like Professor Bameke looked at the issue of bleaching, you could see that there could be factors like conformity, compliance, obedience, and so many others. And a proper understanding of these social influences can be helpful in understanding why people can make certain decisions that impact negatively on their health. And some of those decisions, like the foundation has been laid, include changing the skin color from black to white. And more Black Africans than Americans do this. More females than males engage in this also. And from so many studies, you discover that low self-esteem and negative body image have been implicated in such decisions. But my question is, why is it from black to white? Why not from white to black? That's something we should be dealing with and to find answers to. Now, apart from this, there are several other health implications associated with changing our skin color or bleaching the skin color from black to white. And this could be attributed to some harmful ingredients used in some of these material. Also, there are some other health conditions associated with lightening the skin, such as skin cancer, dermatitis, which is inflammation of the skin caused by contact with certain substances. The symptoms usually include skin redness, skin ulcers, blisters, swellings, and itchings. We also have secondary bacterial infections, as well as big pimples that don't go away, resulting into scars when pressed. We also have dark spots and patches. In some cases, there will be sensitivity of the skin to the sun to a point that one can't be under it for too long. In addition, active ingredients in some skin lightening creams or lotions contain mercury. And we all know that mercury can lead to mercury poisoning. And because mercury is also a toxic agent, it can lead to serious psychiatric, neurological, and kidney problems. Some of the kidney problems it can cause could be something like damage to the blood vessels in the kidney, responsible for filtering waste and excess water. It causes the body to excrete too much protein in your urine. And some of these skin lightening creams containing mercury can also have also been associated with nephrotic syndromes. Symptoms of this include foamy urine, loss of appetite, swollen feet and ankles, as well as fatigue. And one other social decisions people take that might have some health implications include tattoos and piercing the skin. And They see tattoos as a common form of self-expression, but they also damage the skin and can cause complications. Some of such complications can include allergic reactions to tattoo dyes, which may develop years later, skin infections such as staph infection or cutaneous tuberculosis, burning or swelling at the tattoo site. In some cases, we might have granulomas or nodules of inflamed tissues around the tattoo site. There could be keloid or overgrowth of scar tissues. In some cases, bloodborne diseases such as hepatitis B, hepatitis C, HIV, and tetanus can be contracted via contaminated and unsanitary needles used in doing this. Also, we have implants as another social decision some people might take. And when we talk about implants, we are talking about medical device manufactured to replace a missing biological structure or to support a damaged biological structure or to enhance an existing biological structure. There are different types, including the cosmetic implants, which is currently in vogue, and there have been a lot of complications associated with it. For instance, we have issues like chronic breast pain, breast or nipple numbness, capsular contracture, breakage and leakage. In some cases, we have tissue necrosis, and so many more. Then my question is, why do people continue to do this? If they value the person they are, if they value the color they have, and if they believe in themselves. So, in conclusion, what matters is not your color. What matters is who you have told yourself you are. Thank you very much for your attention.
Oh, wow. What a way to just finalize that. Thank you so much, Dr. Ume. That is what matters, who we are, who we take ourselves to be. I really appreciate your thoughts and your insights on that. I know there's absolutely no way we can exhaust all those thoughts you've shared with us, but at least it's a start of the process. There's no one better than Dr. S. Ama Ray, Assistant Professor at the University of California, Irvine. She'll be taking us through Black creativity and technology. Over to you, Irma.
Good morning. It's wonderful to be part of such an esteemed panel of people who are here to share. And I'll do my best with these few minutes. The question of technology and creativity that you posed is a very interesting one. And I chose to invert the question. What is it for us not to be at the center of creativity and technology? What does that look like? So I've just put that out there. We know what that looks like. Historically, we know what it looks like when we are not the purveyors of our own images, of our own stories. We know what that looks like when someone has created a narrative for you. These are all creative acts of will that have been perpetrated on African peoples, wherever we are, and indigenous peoples from wherever they are in the world. So I say that one must regard creativity and art at the center of all of these tangents and connected, interwoven parts of what it is for us to be a liberated people. Art is a technology in and of itself. Art is a way of communicating. Writing is a technology. And today's technology, the literacies that we need to really garner today are digital. It is in the realm of artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning. And those of you out there with children, especially girls, give them the tools to begin their own level of inquiry, because it is those children who are then going to be creating the future that we will live in as we look back at our lives. So we do need to empower young people, children, finding dynamic ways to bring technology into their lives, not just as consumers, but as the potential of being able to manipulate and create with those tools. And we are in the information age. Yes, this is the time that we are living in. Some people might say we are in the disinformation age. And in some ways, it's a furtherance of the tools of propaganda. And we know that art has been used as part of that vehicle of telling stories that manipulate people's consciousness. And so we have to think of ourselves as being part of a renaissance. And that renaissance really does need us to make those kinds of interventions that allow us to bring our entrepreneurship and bring our creativity into those spaces. So simply to do what has been done and to recreate what has been done, that's not really what we're talking about. Creativity is allowing for the space where there's slippage, where there is undefined spaces that can yet be made new. So if we think about where we are right now, consumption, and we're talking about capitalism to the point of almost extinction of human life. So it really isn't about just keeping going. We actually have to ask ourselves as artists some different questions about what it is to be able to maintain, sustain, not in the sense of just keeping going, but what is it to reevaluate? And I think we've had speakers earlier on talk about that. And one of the revolutions that needs to take place in the creative space, in the artistic space, that then permeates out is the revolution in patriarchy, the way in which this Western model of patriarchy works, where actually Black women, Black men, a lot of times are in opposition to each other. And yet we've heard that most of the entrepreneurs, most of the people of color that are making new businesses are women. So let's look at that. Let's look at that as a real opportunity to assess, well, what is the function of patriarchy? If in reality, we are in our own communities seeing that the leaders that are seeking to build new ways out of this ditch are women who also have all manner of other responsibilities and are not getting the support through the banking systems and the opportunities to grow their businesses. So I think it's really important for us to take art and think about the ways in which we can catalyze change and our perceptions of who we are. And storytelling through the digital space is an absolutely bountiful way to do this. Politics works to a certain extent, but the ways in which we can be dynamic in terms of video gaming, in terms of storytelling and filmmaking, painting, the digital world congealing, this is the space where we can permeate, reach the emotions, which is where the decisions are really taking place, right? And these are the ways in which the future means that we all need to be in the space of creating space for all people. And I'll stop there for today. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, that was awesome. Thank you so much, Amma. I mean, I'm getting a lot of text that, oh, I love her. Thank you very much. I know there's going to be a lot of questions that we'll be getting from there. I would like to ask your indulgence. We are running a little bit behind. I just want to ask for 15 more minutes, if you don't mind. We'll really appreciate it. Please post your questions in the chat, in the Q&A while I call on. The OT is my colleagues at UCLA, one of my colleagues at UCLA. He's phenomenal. He's the Chief Procurement Officer at the University of California in Los Angeles. He'll be speaking on the best despite systemic limitations. So over to you, OT.
Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past, to now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. That is the second verse of the Negro National Anthem, a verse often not sung, but I believe depicts the struggle and hopes of Black people in America. To Francesca, the panelists, and those in attendance, it is indeed a pleasure to be here with you this morning. I've been asked to speak on becoming your best, despite all uncontrollable limitations. In order to do that, I have to tell you a little bit about myself. I am of the last generation of children born out of the civil rights movement. In my formative years, the movement was beginning to see the fruits of its labor. The Voting Rights Act and the Equal Rights Amendment were passed. Also, the assassinations of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Bobby Kennedy took place. I mention this time because after all that my parents, my aunts, uncles, and ancestors had endured, I still had to prepare myself for a battle I did not know I had to fight or how to fight it. Black people went from the fields to the State House to demand our rights, fought and died for them and achieved worthy success. Yet and still, what was an overt attack on our skin color, what was a determination to see that Black people stayed in their place, was replaced by an effort to ensure we could only live in certain areas, only work certain good jobs. And despite the efforts of Thurgood Marshall, Charles Hamilton Houston, and others, we still could only get into certain schools. In 1970, I and another African-American boy integrated a prestigious New York City private school. We were often met with the verbal assault of nigger and monkey. It was there that I learned, as we say in the streets, I could throw my hands. It was also there that I learned that despite having to initially defend myself physically, I could also gain respect by performing well in the classroom. My grandfather was a minister, and as such, my family is deeply rooted in the church. One passage of scripture that I learned very young was Psalm 18:39, which says, "For you have armed me with strength for battle. You have subdued those under me who rose up against me." I am fortunate to have a family that truly believes that the battle is already won, that those that seek to cause me harm, either physically, emotionally, or economically, have been defeated. And as long as I do my part, which is to work hard, be present, and strive for excellence, the victory is mine. Earlier, I heard Dr. say he attended Clark Atlanta University. Well, my father, my brother, and I all attended Morehouse College. And as anyone in Atlanta can tell you, you can always tell a Morehouse man, but you can't tell him much. Growing up, I had phenomenal foundation and role models who were active in the civil rights struggle. However, it was at Morehouse that the realization of excellence, not just the idea, was instilled in me. The former Morehouse president, Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays, said that the tragedy of life doesn't lie in not reaching your goal. The tragedy lies in having no goal to reach. It isn't a calamity to die with dreams unfulfilled, but it is a calamity not to dream. It is not a disgrace not to reach the stars, but it is a disgrace to have no stars to reach for. Not failure, but low aim is sin. At Morehouse, the importance of having a goal to aim high is instilled in you. I graduated from Morehouse with the belief that all things are possible through hard work and faith. I've since gone on to sit in the boardrooms of some of the largest companies and institutions in America, leading procurement organizations at major Fortune 50 corporations and top 10 institutions of higher learning, with a responsibility for billions of dollars of spend. Many times, most times, being the only person of color at the table and the most senior, only for someone to ask if I could be the note taker for the meeting, or asking another white person in the room, when could they meet the decision maker, when I was that decision maker. It couldn't dawn on them that this Black man could be the only one holding the power. Not here. I've heard the excuse of we can't find Black businesses that can do the work. That's just not true. The preconceived notion is that Black businesses are not capable, when 9 times out of 10, they are the most capable. It is my duty to help these businesses succeed, and it is theirs to do the work to prove their value. So how do you become your best? Dr. Howard Thurman said it best. There are 2 questions that we have to ask ourselves. The first is, where am I going? And the second is, who will go with me? As Black people, people of color, we will be challenged at every turn, many times by our own. Despite that, we must continue to strive to continue to keep the faith and continue to do our best, to lift as we climb, ensuring we educate and mentor those coming behind us. We are in a race, and our competitors have had a 400+ year head start. Along the way, they've changed the rules and put obstacles in our path, while theirs has been unobstructed. Do not let these uncontrollable limitations get in your way. We are still in the race, and soon the finish line will be in our sights. The goal does not have to be to win at all, but the goal should be to finish at all costs, finishing head high and finishing proud, because your Black matters. Thank you.
Oh my God, OT, you are awesome. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. It's really very important for us to hear that. And, you know, we have a lot of courage. We need to always be our best, and we can do a lot more than we think we're capable of doing. If OT can do it, I can do it, and you can do it likewise. Okay, so we're going to be taking questions soon. I know that Dr. Opokodu is ready. I also know that we're having difficulty from South Africa. I've received a lot of texts. Nobody can get in from South Africa. And one of our major speakers is also in South Africa, so they're not able to connect with us. We're missing hundreds of people right now, but we're going to keep going. We're going to do our very best. Let me share very quickly with you. I'm launching a poll right now. It's just 4 questions. I want you to take it very quickly. Just go ahead and answer those questions on your screen very quickly. There are 4 of them, so please go ahead and answer. Okay, still many more coming in. All right, we're almost, okay, 40%. So once we get to 50%, I'll let you keep going, but I would bring on Dr. Opokodu, and then we'll check where we stand. So it's looking like many of you like to have the conference twice or more than twice. Many of you, in terms of the most thing you like about the conference, everything seems to be leading, then the speakers. Then what can we improve upon? Let me think about it. Okay, thank you. On a scale of 1 to 10, right now we're leading at 7 to 9. Okay, so that's where we are right now. So you can keep our votes coming in. I'm going to turn over to Dr. Opokodu, who would take us through miseducation and mitigation. Dr. Opokodu is a professor from the University of Missouri in Kansas. Dr. Opokodu, over to you. Can you please push your camera down a little bit? We're only perfect. Yeah, just a little bit more so we can see you closely. That's better. Okay, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Fachimi, for your vision and leadership in this timely conference. I am privileged and excited to be a part of it. We are living in a time in which Black people around the world are grappling with the devastating effects of the twin pandemics of COVID-19 and racism, which have opened our eyes to the persistent dehumanization and subjugation of Black people. It is fitting then, excuse me, that in this time of racial reckoning, that Black people seize the moment to reflect on who they are, where they have come from, what they have done, and the enduring struggles they face. The theme of this conference is Black Esteem. Unfortunately, we are in a moment where Black people are questioning their existence and worth. We hear little Black kids asking heart-wrenching questions. Is this going to happen to me or you, Daddy? This is why I want to talk about a condition known as miseducation that affects the humanity of Black people. I will focus on 3 areas: understanding miseducation, consequences of miseducation, and ways to mitigate them. But first, let me emphasize that education matters for the full development of one's humanity and society, but only real education matters. By real education, I mean when people are taught to have the knowledge, values, and skill sets to live their full humanity, by being grounded in their cultural identities, history, and the struggles of their ancestors and their contributions to society. Real education teaches people to have humility, self-dignity, and to respect others, human dignity, regardless of their racial backgrounds. Real education imbues in people with the spirit of Ubuntu, an African way of life in which people recognize that their humanity is totally bound up in others' humanity. What is miseducation? First, let me point out that miseducation cuts across all racial groups. By miseducation, I mean when people receive improper, wrong, or substandard education that prevents them from having and using the knowledge, skill sets, and values to live their full humanity. The miseducated person is one who is thoughtless, unkind, lacks empathy, compassion, harbors racialized, dehumanizes, supremacists, xenophobic attitudes, and biases, and does not value the lives of others, especially those they despise. Regardless of their intellectual capability and achievement, Black people are always viewed as intellectually inferior, incapable, unqualified, less than, and so undermined. We only need to recall all the negative narratives, depiction about the first Black president of the United States, Barack Obama. What are consequences of miseducation? There are many, but we don't have much time. Miseducation generates and contributes to racism, xenophobia, prejudice, bigotry, white privilege, tribalism, hatred, social dominance, and dehumanization. The racial divisions we see today in America and even in Africa have their roots in miseducation. The white master narrative is that whites or Europeans are the only Americans. Whites built America. White is the civilized and superior race. And so whites feel entitled to their white privilege and social dominance. On the other hand, the contributions of Black people, the hard labors in the fields and factories that built Western economies, their inventions have been omitted, distorted, making whites to look down on Black people and Black people to feel inferior and unworthy. Miseducation causes devaluation of the humanity of Black people. Black people are seen as suspect first and civilians second. We have seen this throughout history. Black lives matter. Let me point out that miseducation also happens when Black people, regardless of their level of education, have deficit thinking about other Black people. Suburban raised and educated Black people tend to have contempt for poor Black people. The cultural divide between foreign-born Blacks and American, British, French-born Blacks is another example. So what are the next steps? What do we need to do? Knowledge is power. The eminent scholar, Carter J. Woodson, once wrote that the lynching on Black people began in the schoolroom and at the level of knowledge and ideas. Teach Black children about who they are and not what others say they are. Advocate for an inclusive curriculum that represents and presents the true history and culture of Black people. Remember that textbooks lie and they miseducate and misinform. All Black people must recognize their common humanity and come together, unite for activism. In conclusion, this conference is a great starting point. We must take it further and build coalitions on global Black alliance in our communities to raise visibility, Black affirmation, and solution. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Pokodu. I know there was so much there that you're trying to bring out. And it's so difficult because we are so constrained by time, but we truly want to appreciate you for all those things you brought up. And I'm beginning to understand what miseducation means because my impression of it was very different from what you shared with us, but now I know what miseducation is. Now, we're going to take a couple of questions. There's so many. So we're going to start with a question for Dr. Ama Ray. Here we go. So the question says, nice presentation, ma'am. How do we sustain Black pride within the Western global context?
It's a multifaceted question, and I think everyone can speak to this very same question, but through the arts, the images that are created about us, the stories that are told about us, the ways in which we capture and retell our histories for ourselves must be primary. And we must do this across all different mediums of communication. So in order for us to restore ourselves, this project, if you will, that's going to take several generations can be accelerated if we give ourselves specific challenges, And I almost want to make it a competition that we really do this urgently in terms of facilitating the tools to tell these stories, the tools to be able to, for example, if we are dealing with negative images or images that show Black women who are of lighter complexion as being somehow superior, we're dealing with any of those schisms that are meant to deplete us, then we need to develop technologies that can intercept this kind of toxicity. And all of this is possible, right? So ways in which you can actually filter information coming in. So you can use artificial intelligence to do such things. We can also reclaim our histories that have been stolen in all of these museums across the world that really demonstrate very clearly the magnitude, the level of development and spiritual sophistication that is within our cultures, which was taken away from us or destroyed. We can now rebuild those. We can build the technologies that can survey all of those institutions and bring that to us virtually. There are so many ways that we can use the arts to do this. But first, we have to become literate. We have to really allow ourselves to allow our children to play video games, to be able to then make the inquiry as to, okay, then how does this video game work? How does this action adventure game decision-making process make me potentially more facile when it comes to business? How does this problem-solving game give me access to another aspect of my acuity? How do I develop an embodied practice that relates to my own musical and movement heritage? How do I put that into a gaming environment? Because the gaming environments that we have largely are devised by Western folk who are disembodied for the most part. So we have to really think about how we Africanize, how we re-embody, how we capture the essence of Ubuntu. And we have to make this a central part of our practice, a daily practice. Part of the rigor of being on this planet is doing this.
Thank you so much, Amma. I know there's so much to unpack there, and you did a good job helping us through. I have a question for Dr. Bameka. So this is the question. Yeah. Dear Dean, I believe the issue of skin lightening is far more complex than just beauty. Like you mentioned in South Africa, skin shade mattered in terms of individuals' political opinions. It's not always about wanting to look attractive, but getting jobs, being able to vote, being safe on the street. It goes back to fundamental human dignity. People want to be treated fairly and with dignity, but that's not always the case depending on your skin color. What are your thoughts?
Thank you very much. I do agree with the question. Skin lightening is not simply restricted to beauty, but is related to it. It's beautiful if it's white. So in a way, it has to do with beauty, but it does transcend beauty. Issues of politics, social exclusion, respect, being acceptable, human dignity, all these are involved. Now, mentioning the fact that people cannot get jobs, depending on the shade of your skin, because it shows that you're struggling with something. It shows that you're struggling with your own image. You're struggling with self-acceptance. Problems are there. Racial issues are there. So I do agree that it goes to various issues, the issues that people face in terms of discrimination, negative stereotyping and things like that, but it cannot be solved by skin lightening. Skin lightening simply means that you are throwing in the towel. You want to be like other people are dictating standards of beauty for you, and you are seeking to conform in an area that is essentially not within your power to. Ordinarily, it's not within your power to begin to change the shade of your skin, even though people do it either from simple cream, what is right for Black esteem. So I think that addressing skin whitening is just like addressing the surface. We have to address more serious issues, fundamental issues of inequality, issues of social exclusion that can help to mitigate in terms of Black esteem. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Bameka. I truly, truly appreciate that insight. And you know what? Somebody told me that you, a Black person, you need to be an institution. Somebody once told me that. Create what you're looking for, okay? Now, if you're not able to get a job, I'm gonna tell you, create the job that you want. Create that opportunity that you want. I'm gonna go quickly to this closing video.
Done so much for me, I cannot tell it all. If I had 10,000 tongues, it still wouldn't be enough. Tuku Nagwama really, when you hear completely. What shall I render to Jehovah? For he has done so very much for me. Come on, everybody. What shall I render to Jehovah? Hey! For he has done so very much for me. Nara, 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 yeah. Nare kele, nare kele mo. We sing nara, 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 yeah. Nare kele, nare kele mo. Nare kele tuya, nare kele tuya, nare kele tuya, nare kele tuya.
Oh, wow. Guys, you know, I know we went over time, but you stayed with us. It means so much. There's still so many questions that are coming in, but we are totally out of time. You know, we're going to collate those questions. We get them to our speakers. And once we have all the responses, I promise you, it will be on the website, Your Black Matters. So you will get it there. We'll try to get a recording. We'll put it on the video as well. You'll be able to see it. Unfortunately, we cannot get all our people from South Africa. I'm so sorry. The whole population over there that signed up to be part of us, we're not able to get them on. Hopefully, they will still enjoy what we've been able to enjoy today. One last question, guys. Type on the Q&A. I would like to involve you in the podcast, Reimagining Black Relations, as I told you earlier on, and I would like you to subscribe to it. Some of the speakers you heard today, many of them have been on the podcast. Many are lined up to be on the podcast. You'll be able to hear them one-on-one on their thoughts, what we need to do as the next phase of Black Esteem. So it is so critical that you be a part of this movement. This is just the beginning. And I am confident, without any shadow of doubt, that we are launching forward. Nothing is going to stop us this time around. We just need to be committed. We need to be engaged. We need to be part of the discussion. What you've heard today, share it with somebody. Send the video once it's been published. Send it to somebody. And I know that we can do great things together. I'm so thankful, and I really want to appreciate you all. To all the wonderful speakers, you guys are phenomenal. You made it to be what it is today. And I know this is just the beginning. We're going places together. Thank you all for all the attendees as well. God bless you all. God bless the United States and everywhere else in the world where you signed in from. The Lord bless you. Thank you. Bye-bye.